So Game of Thrones prequel filming news, Cersei's actress talked about her last day on set, Ian Glenn talked more about Jorah, and more. Warning, there are potential spoilers for the final season of Game of Thrones in this video. Please don't watch if you're trying to stay spoiler-free. Or if you guessed the wrong dragon in that other video. I told you to get off this channel, and I meant it. Okay, so let's start on prequel news. So we got more information on the Game of Thrones prequel pilot, which is taking place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. The series chronicles the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour. And only one thing is for sure. From the horrifying secrets of Westeros' history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East to the Starks of legend, it's not the story we think we know. So James Hibberd, that Entertainment Weekly guy that has strong ties to Game of Thrones and HBO and often breaks news, had an interview with Casey Bloys, who is the programming president of HBO, the other day. Casey shared with Entertainment Weekly that the still untitled project begins production in early summer. This is different than the predicted February date for filming to begin. However, Bloys has been very upfront that filming for the prequel pilot will begin in the first half of 2019, which early summer definitely would be. According to James, we're still looking at a 2020 or 2021 air date for the pilot, and that additional scripts are already in the works should HBO decide the pilot is successful enough and orders more episodes to be made. I don't know about you, but that kind of speaks to their confidence that they've already made additional scripts for episodes should this pilot be successful. Just give us at least one season of this, just one season. We of course got more interviews from Jon Snow's actor Kit, who once more is calling the final season groundbreaking. First, he said he shared how the series ends with his wife, who was incredibly upset with him and wouldn't talk to him for 3 days after. So that's a bit scary. Maybe she was simply upset he gave in and spoiled it for her? I've seen stupid shit like that before. Someone begs for info, you give it to them, and then they're pissed you gave it to them. Like, why'd you ask if you really didn't want it? Of course, maybe she's pissed off about certain characters' fates for the finale and her not liking it. Kit also revealed how it feels to know how it ends when others don't, saying, "It's quite nice walking around," which will only happen for a few months before everyone's seen it, knowing I know and no one else does. I know how it wraps up. Yeah, I think it's going to be groundbreaking. In this interview, he was also asked if he was happy about the ending of Game of Thrones, which of course he dodged the question expertly because he doesn't want to spoil anything. He said, "It's a weird one to answer that. I can't really answer whether I'm happy or not. I don't think it's about happy or sad, really. I'm satisfied with what they did, but I don't know whether I'll be really satisfied until I see it." Which I completely understand that editing can make or break something. We know movies that have been complete disasters until they were put in the editing room and the other way around. Good thing HBO has really good editors, so I think we're safe. Next, Ian Glenn, Jorah's actor, talked about the final season of Game of Thrones, saying, "I was in awe of the writing finesse, that it just realized everything in a very fulfilled way. I thought it was brilliant, yet beautiful." Interestingly, Ian seems to talk about the final season with less doom and gloom and shocking statements than other people, and seems to be more on the "it's going to be very fulfilling" train. But maybe he's talking about his own character. He also talked about his character Jorah in the final season, stating, "I think he's very, very relieved and content to be back inside Daenerys' good favor. He's well placed to try and to look after her. Through all the seasons, he's ebbed and flowed with her, and now he's well set. So that's where he is." I'm actually really happy for Jorah too, and that he's so securely by Dany's side, and I hope whatever happens to Jorah in the final season, he dies serving his queen. Lastly, Ian talked about Game of Thrones and how it was the right time to end, revealing, "I felt very sad, of course. You don't want to outstay your welcome. I think it's the right time for us to reach our conclusions. These things have a saturation point, and although people are desperate to see the resolve and see where we go, you want people to wish it was going on, and wish to want more. But personally, it's been a decade of my life. I was in original pilot, and every season since then. I've gotten very fond of the people. You're used to having quite strong relationships with people and then saying bye, and then bumping into them later. And so knowing that you were going back each year, and knowing that the whole thing was growing and becoming so ridiculously, massively, globally popular, it transformed all our lives. It was extraordinary. I know I'll miss it, but I also want to finish when it felt right. A lot of actors have said this is the right moment for Game of Thrones to end. I may not agree with that, but I respect it, so we're almost at the end. Let's move on to Jason Momoa, who may have revealed the red carpet premiere of the final season of Game of Thrones will be on the 3rd of April. He mentioned being excited to see the premiere on the 3rd, but not much else on that. He also shared that those that worked on Game of Thrones are still like family, which I love to hear. So expect leaks for the premiere on the 3rd or 4th of April. Onwards, they revealed the new Adidas Game of Thrones sneaker collection, which I think is absolutely stupid, but I've never liked shoes, so maybe people that enjoy that sort of stuff think it's cool. I don't know, if you're gonna theme them, do more than just lazy-ass basic coloring. Oh, and if you're wondering, Lena shared her last day on set playing Cersei, which I guess was a bear of a day. She revealed, "My last day on set was really weirdly tedious because I just had to shoot going up and down these stairs, and that was it." I would love if they chose to film all those times she goes up and down stairs this season in that one day. That would just be hilarious. Of course, maybe this was her going to her death up the stairs. That was probably just for some boring scenes. I guess we'll see. Onward, Aidan Gillen talked about weird fan experiences, which I'm shocked they weren't weirder than the ones he talked about. The disconnect people have is just astounding. I'm always shocked how many people think the actor is their character and just have absolute fucking freakouts on them. So among the weird fan interactions, he says a lot of people come up to him and ask, "Peter?" Or, "Are you Peter?" He recounted that once, when traveling, he had a curse put on him when he was recognized as Baelish, that a lot of people wiggle their little pinky at him, which is kinda hilarious, and that he's been told a few times to not mess with Sansa. I think the funniest experience he shared was when he was buying groceries and asked for a bag, and the employee responded, "Whatever you desire, Lord Baelish." I'm really shocked he hasn't received more death threats by the idiots of the world. We got new photos for the final season, but they are very generic and don't give a lot away. Regardless, I made an entire video on them speculating recklessly. Mostly we just see a lot of people at Winterfell, Jon and Dany looking very in love, a lot of intense expressions, and Cersei looking pissed per usual. The showrunners D&D want us to know that there is a lot in this season that absolutely outstrips the Battle of the Bastards sequence. So that's going to be really intense. I'd imagine it's going to be all the battles between the living and the undead that's going to make it so crazy compared to the Battle of the Bastards. Lastly, I want to talk about George R. R. Martin. He posted on his Not a Blog, and it's always interesting to be in his head for a little bit through his posts. First, he talked about the release of Fire and Blood last November and whether Fire and Blood is eligible for a Hugo. He wrote, "I had a big Westeros book published last year. Official publication date, November 20th, 2018. Fire and Blood, covering the history of the Targaryen kings from Aegon's conquest to the regency of Aegon III. It's been doing rather well, thank you. Debuted at number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, and is still in the top 10 2 months later. And just last week, we got a great review in Kirkus, a notoriously tough journal. The question of its Hugo eligibility is, well, trickier than usual. Fire and Blood is eligible, certainly. But what category does it belong in? There's Best Novel, the big one. A Dance with Dragons, A Feast for Crows, and A Storm of Swords were all nominated for the Best Novel Hugo in years past. They all lost, to be sure, but never mind. In all the promotional interviews I did leading up to the book's release, however, I took pains to stress that Fire and Blood was not a novel, but rather a work of imaginary history. I used to say fake history, but some of my readers objected. I did not want anyone buying the book under the misapprehension that it was the latest volume in A Song of Ice and Fire. After saying over and over again, this is not a novel, it would be rather disingenuous of me to accept a Hugo. Should it win, which I must admit is rather unlikely, or even a nomination in the Best Novel category. Alas, there is no Hugo category for Best Imaginary History. Fire and Blood is eligible for the Best Series category, but George would prefer it to be in the Best Related Series category as it's related to Ice and Fire. Interestingly, he also shared how he categorizes the Ice and Fire series, writing, "Tolkien's Lord of the Rings was not a series, as I see it, but one long novel published in 3 volumes. These are my definitions, however, not Worldcon's. The Hugo rules are much looser, and would seem to include future histories, mega novels, and true series all in the best series category. For what it's worth, I do not consider A Song of Ice and Fire to be a series. It's one story. A huge, complicated story, admittedly. One that will take 7 volumes to tell, once I finish the last 2. And in any case, Fire and Blood is not strictly speaking a part of A Song of Ice and Fire. It's imaginary history set hundreds of years before any of the characters in Song were born. Yes, I suppose if you bundle Fire and Blood, the 5 A Song of Ice and Fire novels, and the 3 Dunk and Egg novellas, collected as A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, together, you have a series of sorts. I wouldn't even know what to call it. The Westeros series? The Seven Kingdoms series? Not Game of Thrones or Ice of Fire. Certainly. Oh, by the way, George absolutely loved the Bud Light Game of Thrones Super Bowl commercial, and now thinks we need to send dragons after Colonel Sanders and the Energizer Bunny. I love George so much. Alright, that's your Game of Thrones news. Like, subscribe, and I'm not giving you that Puff the Magic Dragon video that some of you are requesting. Stop suggesting it in the comments. Every time you do, I get the Puff the Magic Dragon theme song stuck in my head. Please stop.